In the brutal world of Navy SEAL training, where grown men are broken down and rebuilt into warriors, respect is earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering determination. But what happens when a quiet recruit's hidden past surfaces in the most unexpected way? When Commander Jake Razor Mitchell, a decorated veteran with 3 combat tours and zero tolerance for weakness, discovers a mysterious tattoo on the back of the most unlikely trainee. Everything he thought he knew about courage and sacrifice gets turned upside down. Some secrets are worth more than medals. Some stories demand a salute from even the hardest of warriors. And sometimes the most powerful revelations come from the most unexpected places. This is the true story of how one hidden marking changed everything at the most elite military training facility in the world, and why even the toughest SEAL commander had no choice but to stand at attention and show respect. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Marcus Chun stepped off the bus at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California. At 5 feet 7 inches and weighing just 150 pounds soaking wet, he looked nothing like the other recruits who had arrived for basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. While his fellow candidates resembled walking mountains of muscle and testosterone, Marcus appeared more suited for a library than a battlefield. Commander Jake Mitchell watched from his office window as the new class of wannabe SEALs gathered in the courtyard below. 24 years of military service had given him an eye for identifying the types who would make it through the grueling months ahead. The former college football players with chips on their shoulders usually quit by week 3. The loudmouth braggarts rarely lasted past the first week. The quiet ones with determination in their eyes, those were the ones worth watching. But Marcus Chun didn't fit any category Mitchell had seen before. The young man's file read like something from a completely different world. Born in San Francisco to immigrant parents who ran a small restaurant, Marcus had graduated summa cum laude from Stanford University with degrees in computer science and mathematics. He'd turned down job offers from Google and Apple to enlist in the Navy, citing only a desire to serve in his application essay. "Sir, that's the one I was telling you about," said Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez, entering the office with a stack of medical clearances. "Chin, Marcus. Kid's got perfect vision, perfect hearing, and aced every physical and mental test we threw at him. But look at him." Mitchell observed the slight young man adjusting his oversized gear bag. "What's his story, Rodriguez? Stanford grads don't usually show up here." "Nobody knows, sir. He's been completely closed-mouthed about his background. Won't talk about family, won't explain why he's here. Just keeps saying he wants to earn his place like everyone else." The commander's instincts told him there was more to Marcus Chun than met the eye. In his experience, people didn't give up 7-figure tech careers to endure the hell of SEAL training without a damn good reason. But whatever that reason was, the kid would have to prove himself just like every other candidate. The first day of training began at 400 hours with what the instructors called the introduction. It was designed to separate the committed from the curious within the first 24 hours. The candidates were awakened by the sound of M60 machine gun blanks fired over their heads, followed by instructors screaming orders and dumping ice-cold water on anyone who moved too slowly. Marcus found himself in the middle of organized chaos. Grown men who had dominated college athletics were reduced to stumbling, confused masses as instructors barked contradictory commands. "Drop and give me 50. No, wait, get up and run to the beach. Change my mind. Crawl there on your bellies like the worms you are." While others panicked or showed frustration, Marcus remained calm. He followed orders precisely, never complained, and helped struggling teammates without being asked. When Instructor Williams made the class hold logs weighing 200 pounds over their heads for what felt like hours, Marcus gritted his teeth and held on even as much larger men began to falter. "Chun!" Williams screamed, his face inches from Marcus's. "You think you're tough, college boy? You think your fancy degree means anything here?" "No, sir," Marcus replied, sweat pouring down his face as the log pressed against his shoulders. "Then, why are you here?" What makes you think you belong with these warriors? Marcus stared straight ahead, muscles trembling under the weight. I'm here to earn my place, sir. Williams studied the smaller man for a long moment. There was something in Marcus's eyes, not arrogance or false bravado, but a quiet determination that impressed the veteran instructor. He'd seen countless recruits try to tough their way through training, but this one was different. This one had already made peace with suffering. The first week was traditionally called orientation, though the candidates quickly learned it was anything but gentle. They were subjected to continuous physical and mental stress designed to strip away civilian comfort zones. Sleep was limited to 3 or 4 hours per night. Meals consisted of cold rations eaten in under 5 minutes. Every moment was filled with push-ups, sit-ups, running, swimming, and carrying heavy equipment across endless stretches of sand. Marcus surprised everyone, including himself, by not only keeping up but excelling in areas where his size should have been a disadvantage. During the 2-mile ocean swim, he used efficient technique to outpace men with twice his muscle mass. In the obstacle course, his light frame allowed him to navigate barriers that exhausted heavier candidates. Most importantly, he never quit. By the end of the first week, half the original class had rung the bell, the brass bell that sat in the center of the compound, ready to end anyone's suffering with 3 simple rings. Those who rang it were immediately removed from training, their dreams of becoming SEALs over forever. Marcus watched each departure with quiet sympathy. These weren't weak men by any standard measure. They were college athletes, former military personnel, and dedicated individuals who had trained for months to reach this point. But SEAL training wasn't about being strong or fast or smart. It was about being unbreakable. On Friday night, the surviving candidates were given their first real break. 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep and a hot meal. As exhausted men collapsed onto their bunks, Marcus sat quietly writing in a small notebook he kept in his gear bag. Other recruits had noticed this habit but hadn't asked about it. In SEAL training, everyone dealt with stress differently. "What you writing there, Chun?" asked Tommy Rodriguez, a former Marine from Texas who had become something of a friend to Marcus during their shared suffering. Marcus closed the notebook carefully. "Just thoughts. Helps me process the day." "You processing why a computer genius is trying to become a frogman?" The question hung in the air. Marcus had deflected similar inquiries all week, but something about the genuine curiosity in Tommy's voice made him consider opening up. These men had become his brothers through shared hardship. They deserved honesty. "My grandfather," Marcus said quietly. "He fought in Vietnam. Special Forces. Never talked about it much, but I found his medals after he died. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star. There were letters, too, from men he saved." Tommy waited patiently. Marcus rarely spoke more than necessary, so when he did talk, people listened. He used to tell me that some people are called to build things, and others are called to protect the builders. I spent 4 years building computer programs that help people buy things they don't need. Grandfather would have said I was wasting my gifts. "So you're here to honor him?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm here because he taught me that the most important battles aren't fought for money or glory. They're fought for people who can't fight for themselves. And the men who fight those battles, they need to be ready for anything." It was the longest speech anyone had heard Marcus give, and it revealed a depth of purpose that explained his unwavering determination. He wasn't here to prove anything to anyone else. He was here to prove something to himself, and to honor the memory of a man who had faced hell and emerged as a protector. Commander Mitchell received weekly reports on each candidate's progress, but he made a point of observing training sessions personally. Something about Marcus Chun continued to intrigue him. The kid's physical scores were solid, but not exceptional. His mental resilience, however, was off the charts. When other candidates were breaking down or showing stress fractures, Marcus remained steady. During the second week's night navigation exercise, Marcus's true character began to show. The candidates were divided into pairs and dropped in the desert with only a compass and map. They had 8 hours to reach a checkpoint 15 miles away while carrying 60-pound packs and avoiding instructor patrols. Marcus was paired with Steve Morrison, a former college linebacker who stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed 240 pounds. On paper, they seemed mismatched. In reality, they became an efficient team that completed the exercise faster than any other pair. "How did you know about that ravine shortcut?" Morrison asked as they reached the checkpoint with an hour to spare. "I studied the topographical maps for 3 hours before we started," Marcus replied. "Also researched historical rainfall patterns in this area to predict where erosion would create natural pathways." Morrison stared at his smaller partner with new respect. "You did all that preparation for one training exercise?" "I do that preparation for every exercise. My grandfather told me that superior planning beats superior strength every time." The instructor at the checkpoint, Senior Chief Martinez, overheard the conversation and made a note in his evaluation report. Chen's analytical approach, combined with his physical determination, was creating a unique kind of warrior. The kid was thinking 3 steps ahead, while others were just trying to survive the current challenge. As the second week progressed, Marcus began to earn grudging respect from his fellow candidates. During surf torture, where the class was forced to link arms and sit in the freezing Pacific Ocean while waves crashed over them for hours, Marcus became an anchor of calm. When others started shivering uncontrollably or showing signs of hypothermia, Marcus would quietly start conversations about home, family, or shared experiences to keep minds engaged and spirits up. "Tell me about your first car," Marcus would say to a candidate who was starting to zone out from cold. "Why?" "Because thinking about something warm and familiar helps your brain fight the cold." "What was it?" The technique worked. Marcus had researched survival psychology and understood that mental engagement was crucial during extreme physical stress. He became an unofficial leader not through dominance or loud commands, but through quiet competence and genuine care for his teammates. Instructor Williams noticed the dynamic developing around Marcus and decided to test it. During a particularly brutal beach workout, he singled out Marcus for extra punishment while ordering the rest of the class to continue their exercises. "Chun, you think you're special because you went to fancy college? Drop and give me 100 push-ups while your teammates run sprints." Marcus dropped without hesitation or complaint. As he began the push-ups, something unexpected happened. Tommy Rodriguez stopped running and dropped beside him. Then Morrison joined them. Within minutes, the entire class was doing push-ups in solidarity with Marcus. "Did I tell you maggots to stop running?" William screamed. "Sir, we're a team," Tommy called out between push-ups. "Nobody gets left behind." Williams looked at the unified group and felt a moment of pride mixed with professional satisfaction. This was what SEAL training was designed to create, not individual warriors, but unbreakable teams. And somehow the smallest, quietest member of the class had become the glue holding them together. That night, Commander Mitchell reviewed the day's reports with particular interest. Instructor Williams had noted the solidarity incident, recommending that Marcus be watched as a potential leader despite his unconventional profile. Other instructors were reporting similar observations. The kid was becoming the emotional center of the class without trying to dominate or control. But Mitchell also noticed something else in the reports. None of the instructors had seen Marcus without his t-shirt. During medical examinations, Marcus had requested privacy screens. During shower time, he waited until others were finished. 4 beach workouts where most candidates stripped to shorts. Marcus kept his shirt on despite the extra heat and discomfort. The commander made a mental note to investigate further. In his experience, when someone went to great lengths to hide something during military training, that something was usually significant. But for now, Marcus was performing exceptionally well and building team unity. Whatever secrets he carried could wait. As the 3rd week of training began, the real tests were just starting. Hell Week loomed ahead, 5.5 days of continuous physical and mental torture that would determine who truly had what it took to become a Navy SEAL. Marcus Chun had survived the initial shock and proven himself a valuable team member. But Commander Mitchell suspected that the most interesting revelations about Marcus Chun were still to come. The kid's calm demeanor and analytical mind suggested depths that hadn't yet been explored. And in SEAL training, the deepest truths always surfaced under the most extreme pressure. The morning briefing for week 3 included a warning that would prove prophetic. Gentlemen, you've survived the introduction. Now the real training begins. Hell Week began at midnight on Sunday, with the sound of artillery simulators exploding around the barracks. Marcus jolted awake as instructors stormed through the building, screaming orders and dragging candidates from their bunks. The next 5.5 days would involve less than 4 hours of total sleep, constant physical activity, and psychological warfare designed to break even the strongest minds. Move, move, move. Senior Chief Martinez bellowed as confused candidates stumbled in the darkness. Welcome to Hell Week, ladies. Hope you enjoyed your beauty sleep, because it's the last you'll see for a while. Marcus grabbed his gear and fell in line with the other survivors. Of the original 42 candidates who had started training 3 weeks ago, only 18 remained. Each man who had quit represented someone who had trained for months or years to reach this point, only to discover that wanting something and being willing to sacrifice everything for it were completely different things. The first evolution was a 4-mile run to the beach, followed immediately by surf torture in the 40-degree Pacific Ocean. As the candidates linked arms and sat in the crashing waves, Marcus employed the mental techniques his grandfather had taught him during childhood meditation sessions. Instead of fighting the cold, he accepted it. Instead of dreading the next wave, he focused on his breathing. "You cold, Chun?" Instructor Williams shouted over the roar of the surf. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied honestly. "You want to quit?" "No, sir." "Why not?" "Nice warm bed is waiting for you. Hot coffee. No more freezing water." Marcus considered the question seriously, as he did all things. The truth was that every fiber of his being wanted to escape the misery. But deeper than physical discomfort was a commitment he had made to himself and to the memory of his grandfather. "Because quitting would mean I'm not the man I thought I was, sir." Williams studied the smaller candidate with interest. Most recruits gave standard responses about honor or service. Marcus's answer revealed a more personal motivation, the kind that sustained people through impossible circumstances. After 2 hours in the surf, the class was ordered to run back to the compound for log PT. Each boat crew of 6 men was assigned a log weighing nearly 300 pounds. They would carry these logs everywhere for the next week, during runs, during meals, even during the brief moments when they were allowed to rest. Marcus found himself in Boat Crew 3 with Tommy Rodriguez, Steve Morrison, and 3 other candidates. Despite being the smallest member of the crew, Marcus insisted on taking his full share of the log's weight. When his shoulders began bleeding from the rough bark, he wrapped them in torn pieces of his t-shirt and continued. "Chun, you're bleeding all over the place," Morrison observed during a brief water break. "Everyone's bleeding," Marcus replied matter-of-factly. "It's just part of the process." Tommy Rodriguez watched his friend with growing admiration. 3 weeks of training had revealed Marcus's character in ways that impressed even hardened veterans. The kid never complained, never made excuses, and never asked for special treatment. More importantly, he had an uncanny ability to keep the team focused during the worst moments. The first day of Hell Week continued with a series of evolutions designed to test every aspect of physical and mental endurance. Boat races in the surf, where crew teams had to navigate rubber boats through massive waves while instructors threw smoke grenades and fired machine gun blanks overhead. Obstacle courses run while carrying ammunition boxes and wounded teammates. Medical scenarios where candidates had to treat simulated injuries under time pressure and instructor harassment. Marcus excelled at the mental challenges and held his own during physical tests. His analytical mind allowed him to quickly assess complex situations and develop efficient solutions. During a night navigation exercise, he guided his boat crew through a course that had confused other teams for hours. "How did you figure out that checkpoint sequence so fast?" asked Jim Patterson, another crew member. "I mapped the star positions when we started and calculated our drift rate based on wind and current," Marcus explained. "Once I knew our actual position versus our intended position, the checkpoint sequence became obvious." Patterson shook his head in amazement. "You did trigonometry in your head while we're all half dead from exhaustion." "The math helps me stay focused," Marcus said. "When I concentrate on solving problems, I don't think about how tired or cold I am." Instructor Williams overheard the exchange and made another note in his evaluation. Chun was using his intellectual gifts to overcome physical limitations, but more importantly, he was helping his teammates succeed. The combination of personal capability and team loyalty was exactly what the SEAL community valued most. By Tuesday afternoon, Hell Week had claimed 3 more candidates. The stress of continuous operation with minimal food and sleep was revealing character flaws that had been hidden during earlier training. One candidate was caught hoarding food rations. Another was discovered trying to sleep during a supposedly brief bathroom break. A third simply walked up to an instructor and announced he was done. Marcus watched each departure with quiet sympathy, but no surprise. His grandfather had taught him that everyone had breaking points, and there was no shame in reaching them. What mattered was pushing those limits as far as possible and learning from the experience. The remaining candidates were becoming a tight-knit brotherhood forged by shared suffering. They had learned to function as a unit, supporting weak links and celebrating small victories together. Marcus had become the crew's unofficial navigator and problem solver, while Tommy provided motivation through humor and Morrison contributed raw strength during physical challenges. Wednesday brought the dreaded around-the-world evolution, a 24-hour period where boat crews had to navigate their rubber boats around a course that included multiple beach landings, underwater obstacles, and simulated combat scenarios. Sleep deprivation was reaching dangerous levels, and hallucinations were becoming common among the candidates. During the 3rd beach landing, Marcus noticed that Patterson was showing signs of severe exhaustion. The bigger man was stumbling and having difficulty following simple commands. As the crew prepared to launch their boat back into the surf, Patterson collapsed. "I can't do it anymore," Patterson mumbled, his eyes unfocused. "I just need to sleep for 5 minutes." Marcus knelt beside his teammate and spoke quietly. "Jim, look at me. You're experiencing sleep deprivation symptoms, but you're not actually injured. Your body can do more than your brain thinks it can." "Easy for you to say," Patterson replied. "You're not seeing things that aren't there." "Actually, I am," Marcus admitted. "About an hour ago, I started seeing my grandfather standing on the beach watching us. I know he's not really there, but it doesn't matter. Hallucinations are just your brain's way of dealing with extreme stress." Patterson looked at Marcus with surprise. The smaller man had shown no signs of the disorientation that was affecting everyone else. "How are you handling it so well?" Patterson asked. Marcus helped Patterson to his feet. "My grandfather taught me meditation techniques when I was young. I've been using modified versions to stay mentally centered. But the real secret is accepting that this is temporary. Everything we're experiencing right now, the exhaustion, the pain, the confusion, it will all end eventually. We just have to outlast it." The conversation seemed to restore Patterson's resolve. He took his position in the boat, and the crew continued their evolution. Marcus's ability to provide practical psychological support while managing his own stress was becoming legendary among the candidates. Commander Mitchell received hourly updates during Hell Week, monitoring each candidate's progress and safety. Medical staff were constantly evaluating the remaining recruits for signs of dangerous exhaustion or injury. Several candidates had been removed for medical reasons, but those who remained were proving exceptionally resilient. The reports on Marcus continued to impress. Despite his small stature, he was performing at the top of his class in nearly every evolution. More importantly, His boat crew was functioning better than teams with individually stronger members. Leadership wasn't always about being the biggest or loudest person in the room. Thursday morning brought one of Hell Week's most challenging evolutions, Steel Pier. Candidates had to swim under a concrete pier in the harbor while instructors dropped smoke grenades and created chaos overhead. The water was pitch black, filled with debris, and cold enough to cause hypothermia within minutes. Marcus had never been a strong swimmer compared to candidates who had grown up in the water, but he had developed efficient technique through countless hours of practice. As his boat crew prepared to enter the water, he noticed that Morrison looked particularly nervous. "You okay, Steve?" Marcus asked. "I'm not great with enclosed spaces," Morrison admitted. "Swimming under that pier in the dark, it's bringing up some bad memories from when I was a kid." Marcus understood. Everyone had fears that could surface under extreme stress. The key was acknowledging them without letting them take control. "Stay close to me during the swim," Marcus suggested. "I'll navigate, and you just follow my movements. Think about something else. Tell me about your hometown while we swim." The technique worked. As the boat crew navigated the treacherous waters under the pier, Morrison talked about growing up in Ohio and playing high school football. Marcus guided them through the maze of support pillars and debris while Morrison's voice provided a mental anchor for both men. They completed the evolution successfully, but more importantly, they had proven that teamwork could overcome individual weaknesses. Morrison thanked Marcus afterward, understanding that his smaller teammate had likely saved him from a panic attack that could have ended his SEAL aspirations. Friday brought the final major evolution of Hell Week, a simulated combat mission that would test everything the candidates had learned. Boat crews were assigned to infiltrate a mock enemy position, gather intelligence, and extract without being detected. The exercise would last 18 hours and involve multiple phases of land and water operations. Marcus's analytical skills proved invaluable during mission planning. He identified weaknesses in the enemy patrol patterns and developed infiltration routes that maximized their chances of success. When other boat crews were detected and killed during their attempts, Marcus's crew successfully completed their mission. "Outstanding work, Boat Crew 3, Senior Chief Martinez announced as they completed their final briefing. "Chun, your tactical analysis was spot on. You might want to consider pursuing advanced training in special reconnaissance." Marcus felt a surge of pride, but remained focused on the task at hand. Hell Week wasn't over yet, and he knew that complacency in the final hours could undo days of successful performance. Saturday morning arrived with a final surprise. The instructors announced that Hell Week was officially complete. The surviving candidates had endured 5.5 days of nearly continuous operation with less than 4 total hours of sleep. Of the 18 men who had started Hell Week, 12 remained. As the candidates sat exhausted on the beach, Senior Chief Martinez delivered the traditional Hell Week completion speech. "Gentlemen, you have proven that you possess the mental toughness required to become Navy SEALs. You've learned that the human body can endure far more than the human mind believes possible. Most importantly, you've learned to function as a team under the most extreme circumstances." Marcus looked around at his fellow survivors and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. These weren't just fellow candidates anymore. They were brothers who had shared an experience that would bond them for life. Tommy Rodriguez caught his eye and nodded with respect. Steve Morrison reached over and squeezed his shoulder in gratitude. Even the instructors were looking at the group with obvious pride. But as the candidates prepared to return to barracks for their first real meal and sleep in nearly a week, Marcus caught Commander Mitchell watching him from a distance. There was something in the commander's expression that suggested Hell Week had revealed more than just physical and mental toughness. Marcus had successfully hidden his secret throughout the most intensive period of SEAL training. But he sensed that his carefully maintained privacy was about to be challenged. The most difficult tests of his character might still lie ahead. As he walked toward the barracks with his teammates, Marcus touched the fabric of his t-shirt, feeling the familiar outlines of what lay beneath. Hell Week was over, but his greatest challenge was yet to come. The weeks following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge for the surviving candidates. Physical training continued with advanced swimming, weapons handling, and tactical exercises, but the constant psychological pressure had decreased. The 12 remaining men had proven their basic worthiness to continue SEAL training, earning a measure of respect from instructors and some breathing room to focus on skill development. Marcus threw himself into every aspect of the advanced training with the same quiet determination he had shown throughout the program. During underwater demolitions training, he demonstrated an unexpected aptitude for explosives, calculating blast patterns and charge placements with mathematical precision. In marksmanship training, his steady hands and analytical mind helped him achieve expert ratings with multiple weapon systems. But Commander Mitchell's curiosity about Marcus Chun was growing stronger rather than diminishing. The kid's performance continued to exceed expectations, but his secretive nature remained unchanged. Medical staff had noted that Marcus still requested privacy during examinations and had never been seen without his t-shirt during training activities where others typically went shirtless. Rodriguez. Mitchell called to the senior petty officer after a particularly challenging underwater navigation exercise. I want you to do some deeper background research on Chun. Something about his story doesn't add up. What kind of research, sir? Start with his family background. Stanford records. Military connections. I want to know why a computer science genius decided to become a Navy SEAL, and I want to know why he's so secretive about his past. Rodriguez nodded and left to begin his investigation. Mitchell had learned to trust his instincts over 2 decades of military service, and those instincts were telling him that Marcus Chun was hiding something significant. The investigation began quietly while training continued. Rodriguez contacted Stanford University's records office, requesting information about Marcus's academic performance and activities. He reached out to the San Francisco Police Department to inquire about the family restaurant Marcus had mentioned. He even contacted Immigration Services to research the Chun family's arrival in the United States. What he discovered was puzzling rather than alarming. Marcus's academic records were exemplary. Perfect grades, multiple academic honors, and glowing recommendations from professors. But there were gaps in his personal history that seemed unusual for someone seeking military security clearance. Sir, I found some interesting things, Rodriguez reported during Mitchell's weekly briefing. Chin's academic record is clean, but his family background has some unusual elements. His grandfather isn't listed on any immigration documents for the Chun family. No military service record under that name, either. Mitchell frowned. What about the parents? Father died when Marcus was 12. Mother remarried 2 years later. No military connections anywhere in the immediate family. The restaurant exists, but it was sold 3 years ago when the mother moved to Seattle with her new husband. So Marcus has been on his own since college? Appears so. He worked part-time jobs to pay for living expenses despite having academic scholarships. No social media presence. No romantic relationships on record. Kid's been living like a ghost. The information raised more questions than it answered. If Marcus didn't have military connections through his grandfather, what had motivated his decision to join the SEALs? And why had he constructed an elaborate story about his family background? Meanwhile, Marcus was excelling in advanced training phases. During a complex night infiltration exercise, he successfully led his team through a simulated enemy compound, gathering intelligence and planting explosives without detection. His ability to remain calm under pressure and think strategically was earning recognition from instructors who had initially doubted his potential. Chen's becoming a standout performer, Instructor Williams reported during the weekly evaluation meeting. His physical scores are good, but not exceptional. His mental scores are off the charts. But what really sets him apart is his leadership ability. Other candidates naturally follow his lead, even though he never tries to dominate. Commander Mitchell nodded, adding Williams's assessment to the growing file on Marcus. The contradiction between the candidates' exceptional performance and mysterious background was becoming more intriguing rather than concerning. The breakthrough in Rodriguez's investigation came from an unexpected source. While reviewing Marcus's college transcripts, Rodriguez noticed that Marcus had taken several elective courses outside his computer science major: military history, Asian studies, and comparative religion. One professor's name appeared multiple times: Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, professor of military history. Rodriguez contacted Dr. Morrison's office at Stanford, explaining that he was conducting a routine background check for military clearance. Dr. Morrison agreed to a phone interview that would prove illuminating. Marcus Chun was one of my most dedicated students, Dr. Morrison explained. He took every military history course I offered, despite it having nothing to do with his computer science degree. He was particularly interested in special forces operations in Southeast Asia. Did he ever mention family military connections? Rodriguez asked. Not exactly family connections, but he did extensive research on Vietnamese special forces operations during the war. He wrote his senior thesis for my department on the role of ARVN Rangers and their cooperation with U.S. Special Forces units. Brilliant work, actually. The ARVN Rangers, Army of the Republic of Vietnam Rangers, elite Vietnamese units that fought alongside American Special Forces. Marcus's thesis focused on their sacrifice and courage, particularly during the final years of the war, when they continued fighting despite knowing the cause was lost. Rodriguez felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together. Did Marcus ever mention why he was interested in that particular topic? Dr. Morrison paused thoughtfully. He said he was researching his heritage. I assumed he meant family heritage, but now that you mention it, he never explicitly stated that he had relatives who served. He just said he wanted to understand what his people had sacrificed. After ending the call, Rodriguez immediately contacted the Department of Defense archives to research ARVN Ranger units and their cooperation with U.S. forces. What he discovered would explain Marcus's secretive nature and his motivation for joining the SEALs. During the final years of the Vietnam War, ARVN Rangers had fought desperately to defend South Vietnam against North Vietnamese forces. When Saigon fell in 1975, many of these elite Vietnamese soldiers and their families had been evacuated by American forces. Others had escaped on their own, eventually reaching the United States as refugees. The ARVN Rangers who made it to America had faced a complex reception. Some were welcomed as allies who had fought alongside American forces. Others faced discrimination and suspicion. Many chose to remain quiet about their military service, focusing instead on building new lives in their adopted country. Rodriguez's research revealed that several ARVN Rangers had settled in the San Francisco area, often taking jobs in restaurants and small businesses while their children pursued education and assimilation into American society. The pieces of Marcus's story were beginning to make sense. "Sir, I think I know what Chin's been hiding," Rodriguez reported to Commander Mitchell. His grandfather wasn't American Special Forces. He was ARVN Rangers, South Vietnamese Special Forces. That's why there's no U.S. military record. Mitchell considered the implications. That would explain his secretiveness. Kid's probably spent his whole life dealing with questions about his family's role in an unpopular war. There's more, sir. ARVN Rangers were considered among the best fighters in Vietnam. They operated alongside our Special Forces units and were known for their courage and loyalty. If Chin's grandfather really was ARVN Rangers, the kid has elite warrior heritage. The revelation cast Marcus's behavior in an entirely new light. His quiet determination, analytical approach to problems, and unwavering loyalty to teammates weren't just personality traits. They were inherited characteristics from a grandfather who had exemplified the same qualities under much more desperate circumstances. But Commander Mitchell realized that this discovery created a new challenge. If Marcus had constructed a false story about his family background during his security clearance process, it could technically be grounds for dismissal from the program. Even if the truth was more honorable than the fiction, lying to military investigators was a serious offense. Mitchell decided to confront Marcus directly rather than pursue formal disciplinary action. The conversation would determine whether Marcus's deception reflected character flaws or protective instincts developed during a lifetime of navigating complex identity issues. The opportunity came during a routine evaluation meeting. Mitchell called Marcus to his office after the day's training concluded, ostensibly to discuss his performance during advanced training phases. "Chun, your instructors tell me you're performing exceptionally well in tactical exercises," Mitchell began. "Your analytical skills and leadership abilities are impressive." "Thank you, sir. I'm trying to live up to the standards of this program." Mitchell studied the young man across from his desk. Marcus sat at attention, but his eyes showed the wariness of someone who sensed deeper questioning coming. "Tell me about your grandfather again," Mitchell said casually. "The one who inspired you to join the Navy." Marcus hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Mitchell to notice. "He served in Vietnam, sir. Special Forces. He taught me about duty and sacrifice." "What unit?" Another hesitation. "I'm not entirely certain, sir. He didn't talk about the details of his service very often." Mitchell leaned forward. "Marcus, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Were you completely honest about your family background during your security clearance investigation?" Marcus's composure finally cracked slightly. His shoulders tensed, and Mitchell could see him struggling with a decision that had probably haunted him since he'd first decided to pursue military service. "Sir, my grandfather did serve in Vietnam," Marcus said carefully. "He was a special operations soldier who fought alongside American forces. He earned combat decorations and saved American lives. But his service record isn't in American military files." Mitchell nodded, encouraging Marcus to continue. "He was ARVN Rangers, sir. Army of the Republic of Vietnam Special Forces. When Saigon fell, he managed to escape with his family. He settled in San Francisco and never talked about his military service except to teach me about honor and duty." "Why didn't you tell the truth during your background investigation?" Marcus looked down at his hands. "Because I've spent my entire life watching how people react when they learn my family fought in Vietnam. Some people respect it. Others see it as foreign military service that doesn't count. Others assume we were refugees who should be grateful for American charity. I wanted to be judged on my own merits, not on complicated attitudes about a war that ended before I was born." Mitchell felt a wave of understanding mixed with respect. Marcus hadn't lied to hide something shameful. He had lied to avoid the prejudices and misconceptions that still surrounded Vietnamese military service decades after the war's end. "Marcus, do you know what ARVN Rangers accomplished during the Vietnam War?" "Yes, sir. I've studied their operations extensively. They were among the most effective fighting units in Vietnam. They conducted special reconnaissance, direct action missions, and counterinsurgency operations. Their casualty rates were extremely high because they were always assigned to the most dangerous missions." "Do you know how American Special Forces units regarded ARVN Rangers?" Marcus looked up with surprise. "Sir, they respected the hell out of them," Mitchell said firmly. "ARVN Rangers were some of the bravest soldiers American Special Forces ever worked with. They fought knowing they would receive no recognition if they succeeded and no mercy if they were captured. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and eventually abandoned, but they kept fighting." Mitchell stood and walked around his desk. "Marcus, your grandfather's service record may not be in American files, but his sacrifice and courage were witnessed by American soldiers who are still alive today. You don't need to hide that heritage. You should be proud of it." Marcus felt emotions he had been suppressing for years beginning to surface. "Sir, what happens now?" "I know I violated regulations by providing incomplete information during my security clearance." Mitchell considered the question carefully. Marcus's deception had been motivated by pride rather than shame, and his actual heritage was more honorable than the fiction he had constructed. More importantly, his performance during training had proven that he possessed exactly the qualities the SEAL community valued most. "What happens now," Mitchell said, "is that you continue training and prove yourself worthy of your grandfather's legacy. But, Marcus, no more secrets. If you're going to be a SEAL, you need to trust your teammates and commanders with the truth. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he had carried since childhood. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As Marcus prepared to leave the office, Mitchell had one more question. Marcus, you mentioned that your grandfather earned combat decorations. Do you still have them? Yes, sir. I keep them with me always. Where? Marcus hesitated again, then made a decision that would change everything. He reached for the hem of his t-shirt and pulled it up slightly, revealing the edge of an intricate tattoo that covered most of his back. I had his medals tattooed on my back, sir, along with the names of the American soldiers he saved and the dates of his major operations. It's my way of carrying his legacy with me. Mitchell stared at the partial view of what was obviously an elaborate and detailed piece of artwork. Marcus, how extensive is this tattoo? It covers most of my back, sir. Every medal, every commendation, every mission. His entire service record is documented there, along with traditional Vietnamese symbols honoring his sacrifice. The revelation explained Marcus's secretive behavior about his physical appearance. He wasn't hiding something shameful. He was protecting something sacred. Marcus, Mitchell said quietly, I think it's time your teammates learn the truth about who you really are. The medical examination room at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center had never felt as charged with anticipation as it did on that Thursday afternoon. Commander Mitchell had arranged for a complete medical evaluation of all remaining SEAL candidates, a routine procedure that served as cover for what would become an extraordinary revelation. Marcus Chun stood in line with his 11 fellow candidates, trying to control the nervousness that had been building since his conversation with Commander Mitchell 3 days earlier. The commander had insisted that it was time for complete transparency, but Marcus wasn't sure he was ready for the reactions his revelation might provoke. Dr. Sarah Williams, the base medical officer, conducted the examinations with her usual professional efficiency. Each candidate underwent standard fitness assessments, injury evaluations, and routine medical procedures. When Marcus's turn arrived, Commander Mitchell quietly entered the examination room, along with Senior Chief Martinez and Instructor Williams. Chun, we need to document any identifying marks or scars for your personnel file, Dr. Williams explained. Please remove your shirt for a complete visual examination. Marcus hesitated for a moment, looking at Commander Mitchell, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pulled his t-shirt over his head and turned around. The reaction in the room was immediate and profound. Dr. Williams audibly gasped. Senior Chief Martinez stepped closer for a better view. Instructor Williams muttered something under his breath that sounded like amazement rather than criticism. Covering Marcus's entire back was an intricate tattoo that was clearly the work of a master artist. The centerpiece was a detailed reproduction of military medals and decorations arranged in perfect formation. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star, and several ribbons that the Americans in the room didn't immediately recognize but understood to be foreign military honors. Surrounding the medals were Vietnamese symbols and script, along with dates, locations, and what appear to be names written in both Vietnamese and English. At the top of the design, a pair of jump wings was flanked by traditional Vietnamese dragons. At the bottom, an American and South Vietnamese flag crossed behind a Special Forces dagger. But what made the tattoo truly extraordinary wasn't just its artistic quality or symbolic meaning. It was the obvious historical accuracy and attention to detail. Every medal was perfectly rendered. Every date corresponded to actual military operations. Every name represented a real person whose life had been touched by the actions of Marcus's grandfather. My God, Dr. Williams whispered. How long did this take to complete? 3 years, Marcus replied quietly. I started it during my sophomore year at Stanford and finished just before graduation. I worked with a Vietnamese-American artist in San Francisco who specialized in military memorial tattoos. Commander Mitchell studied the intricate details with growing amazement. Marcus, can you explain what we're looking at? Marcus turned to face the group, no longer trying to hide what he had protected for so long. The Central medals are my grandfather's decorations from his service with ARVN Rangers. The Vietnamese text includes his unit designation, major operations he participated in, and traditional prayers for fallen warriors. The names in English are American soldiers whose lives he saved or whose operations he supported. Senior Chief Martinez, a veteran with multiple combat deployments, stepped closer to examine specific elements. Chun, these operation dates, Firebase Alpha, Operation Phoenix, Tech Counteroffensive, these were major engagements. How do you know these details are accurate? I spent 2 years researching military archives and interviewing American veterans who served with ARVN Rangers, Marcus explained. I wanted to ensure that every element was historically accurate. My grandfather's service deserved that level of respect. Instructor Williams, who had been skeptical of Marcus throughout training, found himself looking at the smaller candidate with new eyes. You've been carrying this with you through every exercise, every evolution, every moment of training. Yes, sir. It's heavy sometimes, not the tattoo, but what it represents. The weight of living up to that legacy. But it also reminds me why I'm here and what's expected of me. Commander Mitchell realized that this moment represented much more than a medical examination. Word would spread quickly among the remaining candidates, and Marcus's revelation would fundamentally change how he was perceived by his teammates. The question was whether that change would be positive or negative. Chun, are you ready to share this with your fellow candidates? Mitchell asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. Sir, I've been hiding this for so long that I'm not sure how to stop hiding. But if you think it's the right thing to do, then yes. I think it's time for complete honesty. Your teammates have earned the right to know who they've been serving alongside. An hour later, the remaining 11 candidates were assembled in the briefing room for what they assumed would be a routine training update. Instead, they found Commander Mitchell, Senior Chief Martinez, and Marcus standing at the front of the room with serious expressions. Gentlemen, Mitchell began, over the past few weeks, you've proven yourselves as individuals and as a team. You've learned to trust each other with your lives and to depend on each other during the most challenging circumstances. That trust is built on honesty and mutual respect. The candidates listened with growing curiosity. Tommy Rodriguez caught Marcus's eye, sensing that something significant was about to happen. One of your teammates has been carrying a burden that he felt he needed to hide in order to be accepted and respected, Mitchell continued. Today, he's going to share that burden with you, and I expect you to receive it with the maturity and honor that befits future Navy SEALs. Mitchell nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward. His hands were trembling slightly, but his voice was steady as he began to speak. I haven't been completely honest with you about my background, Marcus said. I told you my grandfather served in Vietnam with Special Forces, which is true. But I didn't tell you that he was Vietnamese Special Forces, ARVN Rangers, who fought alongside American soldiers. The room was silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. Several candidates exchanged glances, but no one spoke. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would question my loyalty or my right to be here, Marcus continued. I've dealt with those questions my entire life, and I didn't want them to interfere with my ability to serve alongside you. Steve Morrison, who had become one of Marcus's closest friends during training, leaned forward. Marcus, why will we question your loyalty? You've proven yourself 100 times over. Because some people see Vietnamese military service as foreign military service that doesn't count, Marcus replied honestly. Others assume that Vietnamese refugees should be grateful for American charity rather than contributing as equals. I wanted to be judged on my own merits. Tommy Rodriguez stood up. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. During Hell Week, when you helped me through that night navigation, and when you kept Patterson from falling apart, and when you guided us through that surf zone, were you thinking about your grandfather then? Marcus nodded. Every day. Everything I've learned about courage and duty and sacrifice came from his example. He fought knowing he might not survive, but he fought anyway because it was the right thing to do. Then, that's all that matters to us, Rodriguez said firmly. We don't care what flag your grandfather fought under. We care that he was a warrior and that he raised you to be one too. The response from Marcus's teammates was unanimously supportive, but Commander Mitchell knew that complete acceptance would require understanding the full scope of what Marcus had been carrying. There's something else, Mitchell said. Marcus has been honoring his grandfather's service in a very personal and permanent way. Marcus, are you willing to show them? Marcus looked around the room at the faces of men who had become his brothers through shared hardship. These weren't just fellow candidates anymore. They were people he would trust with his life and who would trust him with theirs. Yes, sir, Marcus said quietly. He turned around and slowly removed his T-shirt, revealing the magnificent tattoo that covered his back. The reaction from his teammates was even more profound than it had been from the medical staff. These were men who understood military symbolism and could appreciate both the artistic achievement and the emotional significance of what they were seeing. Jim Patterson, whom Marcus had helped through his darkest moment during Hell Week, stepped closer to examine the intricate details. Marcus, this is incredible. How long have you been carrying this? Since college. It took 3 years to complete. And you've been hiding it this entire time? I wasn't sure how people would react. Military tattoos can be controversial, especially when they involve foreign military service. Tommy Rodriguez moved to stand beside Patterson, studying the elaborate design. Marcus, this isn't just a tattoo. This is a memorial. You've been carrying your grandfather's entire service record on your back. That was the intention, Marcus replied. In Vietnamese culture, honoring ancestors is a sacred duty. This was my way of ensuring his sacrifice would never be forgotten. Senior Chief Martinez, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Gentlemen, I want you to understand what you're looking at. The RVN Rangers were some of the most elite soldiers in Vietnam. They conducted operations that American Special Forces units considered too dangerous. They had casualty rates that would have broken most military units, but they kept fighting. The senior chief moved closer to examine specific details of the tattoo. These operation names, these dates, I recognize some of these. My father served in Vietnam, and he told me stories about ARVN Rangers who saved American lives at the cost of their own. They were warriors in the truest sense. Marcus felt emotions he had been suppressing for years beginning to surface. For the first time in his life, his heritage was being celebrated rather than questioned. Steve Morrison, the former football player who had become one of Marcus's closest friends, placed a hand on his shoulder. Marcus, I have just one question for you. What's that? Why did you think we wouldn't respect this? This is the most badass thing I've ever seen. You've been carrying a war memorial on your back, and you've been earning the right to wear it through everything we've been through together. The acceptance from his teammates was overwhelming. Marcus had spent so many years protecting himself from potential rejection that he had forgotten the possibility of genuine understanding and respect. Commander Mitchell watched the interaction with professional satisfaction and personal pride. This was exactly what the SEAL community represented, the ability to recognize courage and honor regardless of its origins. Marcus's revelation hadn't diminished him in his teammates' eyes. It had elevated him. Gentlemen, Mitchell said, what you've witnessed today is an example of the diversity and strength that makes our special operations community exceptional. Marcus Chun represents the best of American military tradition, not because of where his family came from, but because of the values they instilled in him. As the briefing concluded and candidates began to disperse, the dynamic among the group had fundamentally changed. Marcus was no longer the quiet, mysterious teammate who kept his secrets close. He had become the living representative of a warrior tradition that commanded respect from anyone who understood military history. Tommy Rodriguez lingered as others headed back to barracks. Marcus, can I ask you something personal? After today, I think we're past worrying about personal questions, Marcus replied with a smile. What does your grandfather think about you becoming a Navy SEAL? Marcus's expression grew solemn. He died when I was 16, before I really understood what his service had meant. But I think he would be proud that his grandson chose to continue the family tradition of serving others. I think he would be too, Rodriguez said. And I think he would be proud of how you've honored his memory. As Marcus put his t-shirt back on and prepared to rejoin his teammates, he felt a freedom he hadn't experienced since childhood. The secret that had defined so much of his life was no longer a burden to carry alone. It had become a source of strength shared with brothers who understood its true meaning. But the most profound changes were yet to come. Word of Marcus's revelation would spread beyond the training compound, reaching the attention of senior military leaders who understood the historical significance of ARVN Rangers and their cooperation with American forces. Marcus Chun was about to discover that his family's legacy was more widely respected and recognized than he had ever imagined. The phone call from Admiral Robert Harrison, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, came on a Friday evening 3 weeks after Marcus's revelation. Commander Mitchell was reviewing training reports in his office when his secure line rang with a distinctive tone reserved for high-priority communications. Mitchell here. Jake, this is Bob Harrison. I understand you have a candidate named Marcus Chun in your current SEAL class. Mitchell straightened in his chair. Admiral Harrison was a legend in the special operations community, a Vietnam veteran who had commanded SEAL teams during some of their most dangerous missions. His interest in a single candidate was unprecedented. Yes, sir. Outstanding performer. Why do you ask? I've been hearing some interesting things about this young man's background. Something about ARVN Rangers and a very special tattoo. Is that information accurate? Yes, sir. Chin's grandfather served with ARVN Rangers during the war. The candidate has his entire service record tattooed on his back. Medals, operations dates, even the names of American soldiers his grandfather saved. There was a long pause on the line. When Admiral Harrison spoke again, his voice carried an emotional weight that surprised Mitchell. Jake, I need to see this young man personally. Can you arrange for Chun to report to my office Monday morning? And I want to see that tattoo with my own eyes. Of course, sir. May I ask what this is about? Let's just say that some debts of honor have a way of echoing across generations. I'll explain more when I see you both on Monday. Mitchell hung up the phone with a growing sense that Marcus Chin's story was about to take another unexpected turn. Admiral Harrison's reaction suggested that Marcus's family legacy might be more significant than even the commander had realized. Over the weekend, Marcus continued his training routine, unaware of the attention his case was receiving at the highest levels of Naval Special Warfare Command. His teammates had fully accepted his revelation about his grandfather's service, and the dynamic within their group had strengthened rather than fractured. If anything, Marcus's honesty about his heritage had inspired others to be more open about their own backgrounds and motivations. Tommy Rodriguez had shared stories about his father's service in Iraq and his struggle with PTSD. Steve Morrison had talked about growing up in poverty and using athletics as a way to escape limited opportunities. Jim Patterson had revealed his own family's military tradition and the pressure he felt to live up to expectations. The culture of secrecy that had characterized early training was being replaced by genuine brotherhood based on mutual understanding. Monday morning arrived with Marcus receiving orders to report to Admiral Harrison's office at Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters. The directive came as a complete surprise, and Marcus spent the drive to headquarters trying to imagine what could have prompted such high-level attention. Commander Mitchell met Marcus in the reception area, noting the young man's obvious nervousness. "Sir, do you know why Admiral Harrison wants to see me?" Marcus asked. "I have some ideas, but I think it's better if the Admiral explains himself," Mitchell replied. "Just remember, you've done nothing wrong. If anything, I think you're about to learn that your family's service is more widely recognized than you realized." Admiral Harrison's office reflected decades of distinguished military service. The walls displayed photographs from operations around the world, commendations from grateful allies, and memorabilia from a career spent leading America's most elite warriors. But What dominated the room was a large map of Southeast Asia marked with operation sites and dates from the Vietnam War. Admiral Harrison stood as Marcus and Commander Mitchell entered. At 68 years old, he still carried himself with the bearing of an active-duty SEAL, his silver hair and weathered features speaking to a lifetime of service in dangerous places. "Candidate Chun," the Admiral said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Marcus sat at attention, unsure how to interpret the Admiral's friendly demeanor. "Marcus, I understand that your grandfather served with ARVN Rangers during the Vietnam War, and that you've honored his service in a very personal way. I'd like to hear about that from you directly." "Yes, sir. My grandfather, Chun Duk Min, served with the 1st ARVN Ranger Battalion from 1968 to 1975. He participated in numerous operations alongside American Special Forces units. I've had his service record tattooed on my back as a way of honoring his memory and carrying his legacy forward." Admiral Harrison leaned forward with obvious interest. "Marcus, would you be willing to show me this tattoo?" "Of course, sir." Marcus stood and removed his shirt, turning to display the intricate artwork that covered his back. Admiral Harrison studied the detailed design for several minutes, occasionally pointing to specific elements and asking questions about dates and operation names. "This operation here," the Admiral said, indicating a particular section of the tattoo. "Firebase Alpha, April 15th, 1970. Can you tell me what your grandfather did during that operation?" Marcus had memorized every detail of his grandfather's service. "According to the records I found, his unit was assigned to provide reconnaissance support for an American Special Forces team that was establishing a forward operating base. They came under heavy enemy attack and were in danger of being overrun. My grandfather's squad provided covering fire that allowed the American team to establish defensive positions and call for air support." Admiral Harrison nodded slowly. "The American team leader during that operation was Lieutenant Robert Harrison. Your grandfather and his men saved my life and the lives of 8 other Americans that day." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He turned to face the Admiral, struggling to process the implications of what he had just heard. "Sir, you knew my grandfather?" "I knew him. I fought alongside him, and I owe him more than I can ever repay," Admiral Harrison said with obvious emotion. "Chun Duk Min was one of the bravest soldiers I ever had the honor of serving with. When our position was being overrun, he voluntarily exposed himself to enemy fire to provide the covering fire we needed to survive. He saved American lives at the risk of his own." Marcus felt his legs weaken and sat down heavily. "Sir, I never knew. My grandfather never told me he had direct contact with American forces. That was typical of ARVN Rangers," Admiral Harrison explained. "They never sought recognition or glory. They just did their duty with more courage than most people could ever imagine. After that firefight at Firebase Alpha, I made a promise to myself that if I ever had the opportunity to repay that debt, I would." Admiral Harrison moved to his desk and retrieved a small wooden box. "Marcus, your grandfather earned American military decorations for his actions during that operation, but the political situation at the time prevented us from formally presenting them. I've been carrying these for 55 years, hoping someday to find a way to honor his memory properly." The Admiral opened the box to reveal a Bronze Star Medal with a V device for valor, along with the accompanying citation signed by Admiral Harrison himself when he was a young lieutenant. "This belongs to your family," Admiral Harrison said, offering the box to Marcus. "Your grandfather earned it with his blood, and you've earned the right to receive it through your own service and dedication to his memory." Marcus accepted the box with trembling hands, reading the citation that described his grandfather's actions in detail. The official recognition of his grandfather's heroism was overwhelming, but even more meaningful was the obvious respect and gratitude in Admiral Harrison's voice. "Sir, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just continue to honor his legacy through your own service. From what Commander Mitchell tells me, You're well on your way to becoming exactly the kind of warrior your grandfather was. Admiral Harrison stood and moved toward the door. Now, there's one more thing I need to do. Marcus, would you please put your shirt back on and accompany me outside? Marcus dressed quickly and followed Admiral Harrison and Commander Mitchell out of the building toward the parade ground where the entire SEAL training class, not just Marcus's group, but all current candidates, had been assembled along with instructors and base personnel. As they approached the formation, Admiral Harrison called the assembly to attention. Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to witness something unprecedented in the history of this command. The Admiral positioned himself directly in front of Marcus, who stood confused and increasingly nervous as hundreds of eyes focused on them. Candidate Chun, Admiral Harrison announced in a voice that carried across the entire formation. Your grandfather, Chun Duk-min of the 1st ARVN Ranger Battalion, saved my life and the lives of 8 other American soldiers during combat operations in Vietnam. His courage and sacrifice exemplified the best traditions of military service and alliance between American and Vietnamese forces. Admiral Harrison paused, allowing the significance of his words to register with the assembled crowd. Today, 55 years after the fact, I have the honor of presenting your grandfather's Bronze Star Medal to his grandson, who has chosen to continue the family tradition of service and sacrifice. The Admiral formally presented the medal box to Marcus, who accepted it with hands that were no longer trembling. The weight of official recognition for his grandfather's service was profound, but the public acknowledgement of his family's honor was transformative. But there's more, Admiral Harrison continued. Marcus Chun, through his own performance during SEAL training, has proven himself worthy of his grandfather's legacy. He has demonstrated the courage, integrity, and dedication that define the finest warriors in any military tradition. The Admiral stepped back and came to attention. Then, in a gesture that stunned everyone present, Admiral Robert Harrison, a decorated Vietnam veteran and the highest-ranking SEAL in the U.S. Navy, rendered a slow, deliberate salute to Marcus Chun. The effect was immediate and electric. Commander Mitchell snapped to attention and saluted. Every instructor on the parade ground followed suit. Within seconds, hundreds of personnel were standing at attention, saluting a SEAL candidate whose family legacy had just been recognized at the highest levels of military command. Marcus, overwhelmed by the honor being shown to his grandfather's memory, returned the salute with precision and pride. Tears streamed down his face, but his bearing remained military and dignified. As the salutes were held for what seemed like an eternity, Marcus felt the weight of generations lifting from his shoulders. His grandfather's service was no longer a hidden family secret to be protected from judgment. It was a source of honor recognized by the very military establishment his grandfather had fought to defend. When Admiral Harrison finally dropped his salute, the spell was broken and the assembly gradually returned to normal postures. But the impact of what had just occurred would resonate throughout the naval special warfare community for years to come. Candidate Chun, Admiral Harrison said in a voice that carried both authority and warmth, your grandfather would be proud of the man you've become and the warrior you're becoming. Continue to honor his memory through your service. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As the assembly dispersed and Marcus's teammates gathered around him with congratulations and backslaps, Commander Mitchell reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A young man's decision to honor his grandfather through a tattoo had led to the recognition of heroism that had gone unacknowledged for more than half a century. But more importantly, Marcus Chun had proven that courage and honor transcend national boundaries and political complications. His grandfather's service with ARVN Rangers and his own dedication to SEAL training represented the best of military tradition, the willingness to sacrifice for others regardless of personal cost. 3 months later, Marcus Chun graduated from basic underwater demolition/SEAL training as the honor graduate of his class. The Bronze Star Medal earned by his grandfather was displayed prominently in his room, alongside his own newly earned seal trident. The tattoo on his back had evolved from a hidden burden to a source of pride that inspired fellow warriors and honored the memory of a man whose courage had saved American lives. Admiral Harrison attended the graduation ceremony and personally pinned Marcus's trident to his uniform. As the ceremony concluded, the admiral had one final conversation with the newest SEAL in his command. "Marcus, your grandfather's courage saved my life 55 years ago. Your courage in honoring his memory and pursuing your own path of service has inspired an entire generation of warriors. That tattoo you carry isn't just art. It's a testament to the unbreakable bond between warriors who fight for something greater than themselves. Sir, my grandfather taught me that true honor comes not from the recognition you receive, but from the service you provide. I hope to live up to that standard every day." Admiral Harrison smiled. "Based on what I've seen, I have no doubt that you will." As Marcus Chun walked away from his graduation ceremony, he touched his back where his grandfather's legacy was permanently etched into his skin. The secret tattoo that had once represented hidden shame had become a symbol of recognized honor. And somewhere he believed Chun Duk Min was watching with pride as his grandson continued the family tradition of serving others with courage and distinction. The salute that Admiral Harrison had rendered wasn't just recognition of past heroism. It was a promise that the sacrifices of forgotten warriors would never truly be forgotten, and that honor transcends time, nationality, and political complexity. In the end, what mattered was not the flag under which someone served, but the courage with which they served and the lives they saved through their sacrifice.